So, American psychologist Henry Alexander Murray was born in New York City on May 13th, 1893. He was born to Henry Alexander Murray Sr. and Fannie Morris Babcock. He had an older sister and then later got a younger brother as well, so he's the middle child. He had a good relationship with his father, and he had a very poor relationship with his mother. He documents in his biography that he actually thinks that he was much more sensitive to both other women as well as other people's moods and emotions because of how his mother's treatment towards him was. He said he always felt like the least favorite child, and it was very apparent to him. So Henry Murray goes to college and graduates from Harvard University with a bachelor's in history. He then goes on and attends Columbia University. He graduates with a master's in biology. And then he takes a little bit of a break and then goes to Cambridge and actually gets a degree from University of Cambridge in biochemistry. He gets his PhD at age 35 and then continues on to becoming a professor shortly thereafter. Henry Murray meets his wife at Harvard University. He marries Josephine Rantoul in 1916. They have their daughter, Josephine, named after their mother, shortly later after they get married. About 7 years into this marriage, Henry meets who he thinks is his next love of his life, Christiana Morgan. He continues to then have an affair with Christiana for almost the next 40 years. But at the beginning, this dilemma he did not want to leave his wife and daughter for Christiana, but also wanted to continue seeing both of them. Christiana then goes on to urge Henry to go see Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, and he then tries to figure out this solution to his problem. And this actually opens Henry's eyes to the world of psychology, and he continues to kind of pursue psychology after that. Josephine and Henry were married for about 45 years up until Josephine's death in 1962. And then a few years later, Henry meets his second wife, Carolina Fish, who also goes by Nina, and they were together until Henry's passing later on. So Henry Murray developed this theory of personology. So he decides there's two main subjects. There's primary needs, which are needed for survival, like oxygen, food, water. And then there's secondary needs, which are more for fulfillment or like well-being needs, so like affection. He also defines that environmental influence has a huge impact. And he goes on to actually define about 27 psychogenic needs that people have, but have at different levels. So if I have a need for affection, the next person might have a different level of need for affection. He actually defines 3 basic foundational needs: achievement, belonging, and power. And these serve as the future basis of some of the more well-known personality theories or motivation theories. So we have David McClelland's achievement motivation theory, as well as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And these actually show much more famously than Henry's work of personology. Henry actually develops this test with his mistress slash coworker called the thematic apperception test. And so this is a survey for uncovering unconscious needs. And so they ask very basic or vague questions, and the person answering these questions may answer in a way that they subconsciously have a need that they wouldn't know of otherwise. So some of the criticisms with his work was that the options were too vague, the researcher could influence the questions, or there was actually no guide to how you were supposed to assess the answers to these questions, so it was all up to the person giving the apperception test to understand what the answers meant. During Henry's military service, he was propositioned to do a psychoanalysis on Adolf Hitler. He predicted if Germany surrendered, Hitler would commit suicide. That later on came to be true. His prediction came true. And he took his predictions from some of the behaviors he exhibited in like his biographies, his military service, and stuff like that. This was kind of the first of its kind of this assessment, and he later became more common that in the service or in even like the FBI, the CIA, they all have these types of assessments now. And Henry actually was probably one of the most well known for his Harvard study. He was testing the stress on the mind of intense interrogation techniques, and he later was kind of tied to the Unabomber because Ted was actually one of his participants in the stress study. And Ted also goes on to claim that the study was one of the worst times of his life. And in today's standards, actually, I don't believe that study would be deemed as ethical, and I don't think that would have gone through at this time. Henry passes away in Cambridge at his house from complications with pneumonia. So he was at the age of 95, and he actually had kind of a pretty poor legacy. He was still very negatively viewed from his study in Harvard and connections with the Unabomber. And then he also never fully formed and published his theory of needs. So he didn't really have a very positive and healthy legacy.